Welcome back to episode 9 of Lighthouse Health and Safety Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Chandran. And today's topic is on fatigue management. My history with fatigue goes back to around 2005-2006 when I first studied shift work and sleep whilst I worked as an occupational health and hygiene SME for Australia's Federal Petroleum Safety Regulator. I then undertook a fatigue masterclass with a well-known expert in 2008 and have been working in the fatigue management space ever since. In 2021, I supported a number of delivery projects during shutdown windows and facilitated a number of fatigue management awareness sessions for Tier 1 construction contractors. I remember about 2 weeks after running one of those sessions, a construction superintendent sent me a personal thank you email saying that in his 20 years, it was the only training that helped him to get better sleep on night shift. You know, that feedback really made my day, and this is why I continue to run sessions like this, because it makes a real difference to some people's lives. However, today's session is a bit stripped back, so I'll keep it more punchy and just highlight the main points that I think you should remember and then implement in your own way if you want to improve your sleep quality and reduce fatigue. So let's start with, what is fatigue? Occupational fatigue is a hazardous event which causes a gradual decline in an individual's alertness and performance, resulting in sleep. In the past, I've talked about bow tie theory for risk management. So occupational fatigue, being a hazardous event, sits in the center of the bow tie diagram. Fatigue is primarily caused by insufficient quality sleep, prolonged wakefulness, and working at times when you would normally be asleep. They are the three primary causes. Fatigue may be increased if workers are required to maintain concentration for extended periods of time, they are exposed to additional environmental stresses, or task complexity is high. In essence, fatigue is a drive to sleep. So how do you identify fatigue in the workplace? Well, as I mentioned, fatigue is primarily caused by prolonged wakefulness, working between the hours of approximately 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. in the afternoon, or 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. in the morning. I say approximately because it does vary slightly between people. And thirdly, fatigue is caused by obtaining less than about 7 to 8 hours of uninterrupted quality sleep on average per day. Now in the workplace, a supervisor or a manager can actually do things to reduce prolonged wakefulness and people working between 1 to 3 p.m. and 2 to 4 a.m. in the morning. However, it is a little bit more difficult to ensure that people get quality sleep. And this is why fatigue management is a joint responsibility between the worker and their supervisor. As they say, it takes two to tango. An employer can create the right environment for sleep, but the worker must ensure that they are responsible as well and that they do things to improve their sleep quality. And that could mean improving their fitness, losing excess weight, having a better diet, and using the opportunity for sleep that the employer has given them to get sleep and not use it for other activities that keep them awake. So what can you do to get better sleep? We're going to delve into how to get better quality sleep by looking at the circadian rhythm. The body's circadian rhythm is also known as the body clock. And the word circadian simply means around a day. So in other words, what your body is doing in a 24-hour period. The body operates at peak efficiency at certain times of the day, and it needs to rest at others. You need to know what those times are when the body wants to rest, because they are the best times to get sleep. And the best times I get sleep are the times when you don't actually want to be awake. As I mentioned before, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. and 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. are the best times to get sleep. Why is this? Simply, it's because your core body temperature drops at these two times of the day, particularly between 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. That is the most pronounced drop in core body temperature. Why is that important? Quite simply, when your core body temperature drops, your ability to stay awake, your alertness, drops as well. This is what fatigue is. So those two times of the day when your core body temperature drops are the two times where you do not want to be doing any fatigue critical activity or safety critical tasks, such as driving a motor vehicle or operating heavy machinery. Now that's great, but there's a flip side to this, because there are times of the day when you are at your best. These are the times when it is much better to be undertaking safety critical activities. And these times are around 10 a.m. in the morning and also around 5 p.m. in the evening. So if you want to be at your best and most alert in a 24-hour period, around 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. are the times where you would want to be undertaking those higher risk activities, or generally undertaking any sort of work that requires a high degree of alertness and high performance. So that's the circadian rhythm. Now let's jump into something a bit more interesting, neurochemistry. And I'm going to talk about 4 hormones or 4 neurotransmitters. The first two are serotonin and melatonin. They sound very similar, and there's a very good reason for it, because chemically they are very, very similar. Serotonin is a feel-good hormone. It is produced from tryptophan, which is an essential amino acid, and it is produced in the presence of light. Serotonin prepares the mind and the body for activity. And you want to have good serotonin levels when you perform any work, because you'll then feel at your best. Now, when the sun goes down, when the body thinks that it is getting into the evening and it needs to prepare itself for sleep, the body will convert that serotonin into melatonin. So melatonin is produced from serotonin in low light conditions. It is a natural depressant. It prepares the mind and the body for sleep. So it might seem like an unusual paradox where you have serotonin, which makes you feel good and alert, and that chemical is actually required to produce melatonin, which is a natural depressant. But this is the cycle that goes on in the body. You need to respect that biochemical process. So if you want to get good sleep, you actually have to have good levels of serotonin during the day. Good exposure to light. Eat foods that contain tryptophan so that you can produce that serotonin. And then when the lights go down, you will then be able to produce more melatonin naturally, which will prepare your body for sleep. So they are the first 2 neurotransmitters. The other 2 are caffeine and adenosine. Now everyone's probably heard of caffeine, but probably not so much on adenosine. But like serotonin and melatonin, they both are chemically very, very similar. Caffeine binds to the same receptors as adenosine, so it displaces adenosine. caffeine increases nerve activity. It is a stimulant. Why is this a problem? Well, I think most people will be very familiar with having their cup of joe in the morning just to get them going in the morning, right? And get them ready for work. But you need to be aware that caffeine is also doing something which is going to really impact your ability to get quality sleep. Adenosine is a waste product of adenosine triphosphate metabolism, right? So adenosine triphosphate is also known as ATP. Adenosine accumulates in the body when you're awake. So it accumulates in the bloodstream. It slows nerve activity. It makes you feel drowsy. Now you might think at this point, well, then I don't want to have adenosine in my bloodstream when I'm doing any safety critical work. Absolutely right. But because it makes you feel drowsy, it is very helpful for you to get some good sleep. When you take caffeine, you delay that drowsiness. But not only that, but the adenosine as a waste product continues to build up in your bloodstream. So if you have caffeine over the course of your day, what you're doing is you're prolonging the adenosine that's in your bloodstream. And what happens is you wake up in the morning and you feel very groggy, very drowsy, because you have more adenosine in your bloodstream than you should have. Okay, because the caffeine that you've been taking has been displacing the adenosine and it can't get broken down and absorbed back into the body. Okay, this is very, very important. And sleep is very, very important to recycle adenosine into the body. You must get good quality sleep to recycle that adenosine. As soon as you prolong your sleep with caffeine or other stimulants, then you will wake up feeling very groggy because you'll have higher levels of adenosine in your bloodstream. This is the danger of taking too much caffeine or other stimulants. So hopefully you found that piece of information quite insightful. Serotonin, melatonin, caffeine, adenosine. But now we're going to jump into the next section. Assessing fatigue-related impairment. Because fatigue is caused by prolonged wakefulness and working between higher risk times of the day and not getting quality sleep, then fatigue risk assessment should address the number of continuous hours worked, the times of day that safety critical work is being done, the hours of quality sleep that are being obtained per day, and the type of work that is done. If it's safety critical work, then it is fatigue critical work. Now, questions for supervisors. In relation to members of the workforce, supervisors should ask, have they been given an adequate opportunity for sleep? Second, have they been given adequate fatigue management training? Thirdly, have they obtained adequate sleep for the tasks they are expected to engage in? Fourthly, are they exhibiting symptoms of fatigue? And lastly, is fatigue-related error occurring? In other words, are you having incidents, and is fatigue-related error coming back as a contributing factor? These are questions that supervisors should ask if they want to be on top of fatigue management. And if you're an employee, don't squander your awake time. Be very disciplined in how you use your hours. Now let's jump into a real-life case study on fatigue management and a prosecution going back from an incident in 2016, which is known as Kerle versus BMA Alliance coal operations. And you can find this on the web and have a read of the transcript yourself, which is very, very enlightening. But here are some salient points with the incident and with the prosecution. So at about 6:30 a.m. in the morning of the 30th of October 2008, Mr. Harold Kerle commenced his drive home from work. He was employed as a dump truck operator at the Norwich Park mine. The mine is located near Dysart in central Queensland. His home was at Monto, about 430 kilometres away. The drive would normally take about 5 hours. He had just completed 4 consecutive night shifts, the last finishing at 6 a.m. Shortly before 10 a.m. and nearly 300 kilometres into his journey, his motor vehicle collided with an Armco rail on a bridge crossing at Alma Creek on the Burnett Highway. His vehicle then collided with a concrete wall at the far end of the bridge. Mr. Kerle suffered injury, most significantly a brain injury. Now here's some particulars with the matter. Mr. Kerle sought damages against his employer, Axial HR, his host employer, HMP Constructions, and the operator of the Norwich Park mine, BM Alliance Coal Operations, or BMA. He claimed that they each breached duties owed to him in various ways and thereby caused his injuries. The theory underlying the claim was that the accident came about because Mr. Kerle was fatigued as a result of working night shifts in the 4 nights leading up to the morning of the accident. Each of the defendants denied liability. Damages had been agreed at a gross amount of $1.25 million, and those damages were proportioned as follows. BMA via HMP, a 10% and 90% split. HMP and Axial, a 60%, 40% split in liabilities. Now here is the decision summary. Was fatigue a significant contributing cause to the accident? Yes, it was, the court decided. Does the scope and content of the duty owed by Axial and HMP to Mr. Kerle extend to taking reasonable steps to protect him long after his employment had ended and hundreds of kilometres from his workplace? The court decided yes. Did BMA owe any duty of care at common law, there being no dispute that Axial and HMP did owe such duties? Yes, BMA did have that duty. Did any defendant breach any duty of care owed? Yes, the court found that each of them had. Was there any causal link between any breach of duty and the injury suffered? Yes. Did the breach of the duty owed showed a lack of reasonable care for Mr. Kerle? Yes. Should there be an apportionment for contributory negligence? No. So this represents a summary of the decision made by the court. It's a very interesting read, and I really encourage you to have a look. This decision was made by the Supreme Court of Queensland. A 2016 judgment, QSC 304, and you can find that at queenslandjudgments.com.au. You know, if this is the sort of thing that floats your boat, I really encourage you to read through that transcript. I think the testimony of the expert witness and the judge's opinion of the expert witness is also quite an interesting read. And I wanted to just finish off by talking about controls. How do you control fatigue and fatigue-related impairment? Now let's start by looking at a hierarchy of control. And we're going to start with engineering controls, and in particular accommodation standards. To get quality sleep, you want to have a cool, dark, quiet place, a comfortable bed, a shower, and incandescent lights rather than fluorescent lights, as they're a lower energy light source. You may wish to also introduce activity monitoring, tag on, tag off systems. But just ensure that if it falls under the category of health monitoring, that you have the permission of your people before you introduce such a system, as health monitoring records need to be controlled very, very carefully. Next, we jump into administrative controls. You'll want to have a fatigue management policy. This is like a contract between an employer and employee. It will state what the employer will do for the employee to minimize their fatigue. But it will also state the obligations of the employee to take the opportunities for sleep that they're given, to not squander their wake time, etc. You must give an employee an opportunity for sleep, a reasonable opportunity to get that 7 to 8 hours sleep. Rostering practices, so scheduling of critical tasks at times when the body is most alert and performance is likely to be higher. You may wish to have a monitoring regime, for example, a prior sleep-wake model, or even a behavior-based safety program which looks at identifying fatigue-related behaviors so that you can act on them quickly. Incident data, is fatigue a contributing factor in incidents? That is something you may wish to monitor. You will want to run a fatigue education program, covering the salient points like I've already covered now. And you will want to train your supervisors and ensure adequate supervision as well. There are also some personal routines that you can take if you're involved in night shift or you're having trouble getting quality sleep. I talked about tryptophan being the essential amino acid that is used to produce serotonin. Foods like turkey, chicken, hard cheeses, nuts, bananas, they're good sources of tryptophan, which will help you to make serotonin and therefore will improve your melatonin production as well. So keep in mind, the more serotonin you produce during the day, the more melatonin you will produce at night. Increase your exposure to light during the day so you produce serotonin during the day. Exercise during the day and avoid training before you go to bed. Be also mindful that the times when people are most likely to have any sort of cardiac arrest or heart attack is in the early hours of the morning when your core body temperature is at its lowest. And minimize your exposure to light sources at night and have a hot shower just before you go to bed, unless you have hypertension. The concept here is that you raise your core body temperature having a hot shower, and then as you exit into a cooler room, that rapid decrease in body temperature as you're going from a hot shower to a cool room will make you feel drowsy and prepare you for a good night's rest. But if you have hypertension, you should not be doing this. You should speak to your cardiologist for professional medical advice on what you can do to get better quality sleep. And that's it. We've come to the end of the session. I hope that you found it quite informative. Please go away, practice some of these techniques and tell me how they went for you. Did they work? Did they not work? I'd like to know. But we've come to the end. Be well, stay safe, and I'll see you later.